So to get back to Clive's point, right? It's like you had talked initially about like having good looks and then doing this type of like murder. Like, what do you see as the correlation between that? Like, given even like we didn't mention the Menendez brothers. That was a doc that just came out.
Yeah.
Now, like they're about to be possibly out and things like that. So, what have you found in your research or your studies? Like, is there a correlation there, or I guess why are people obsessed with good-looking people who commit these types of murders?
When I started reading into the story, I was like, let me kind of get more of the mental state of like where it all stems from.
When investigating this case, I learned about the song that she sang in the Maricopa County Jail. And it's interesting. It's an amazing voice. I've showed this video to several people who have openly come out and discuss what it is that they're dealing with when it comes to mental health and the issues that they face almost daily. And every one of those people have said the same thing. That's the real Jodi Arias in that video. But it almost feels like a confession when you really listen to the words and even her mannerism, body language. It's almost like she's revisiting that night, that oh holy night.
So sitting down and getting to interview and talk with these people, I learned a lot of inside information that I really don't think became public.
All right, so with that being said, welcome back to another episode of the Within Range podcast. Ear God is on today. Jared Suter is on today. Dom Juan. Guest we have on today is clearly no stranger to the pod. So Clive, real quick, just before we get into this, listen, you've been on our show twice now. We actually interviewed you the first time at a studio in Old Town Scottsdale. You know, we've talked to you about UFOs, aliens before. Drew, Jared, you guys know this. You're taking us down a different path, right? So I guess, for people who may have watched our show or keep up with your documentaries, talk to us about this transition for you and what, what's to come with this.
Yeah, so it's not a complete shift of what I'm doing. I'm still doing the alien stuff, the unknown, paranormal, but, the main topic is why is there such a fascination with crime, murder,
I'm guilty.
Death, right? You were telling me
I'm guilty,
you
dude.
love this stuff, so I'm trying to figure out like where this all started, how it happened. You know what I mean? Like we are just in a world where crime is just number one.
Okay, so listen, Jared might need to assist me with this, but so it was this lady who was part of this church, and I guess somehow it ended up in a cult setting. She ended up having an affair, but her husband got murdered, and then she and this guy she was having an affair with buried their kids at a farm they had up in Idaho. But she's been tried here. I think she was out of Chandler.
It started in Chandler.
It started in Chandler.
Yeah,
I think that's where the church started, was in Chandler. And then, dude, it's the biggest case going on in Arizona right now.
By the end, I mean, she was mentally ill, but she thought she was a god, and she was getting told by God that her kids were demons and that they needed to be killed, and so they did that, buried them. Yeah.
Found the bodies and everything.
I've been looking into the gentleman up in like Idaho that killed the college students.
Yeah.
He's on court now.
Horrifying,
if I'm not mistaken. And then another one that I was looking at because you said mental illness, right? And that was one of the aspects of a lot of the crimes that I was, looking at, even present and past. The one more that I was focused on was Luigi Mangione.
United Healthcare, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's like he didn't. From what I understand, he went to an Ivy League school.
Oh yeah, he had a cush life, like
living good.
Yeah,
and that type of and this is all alleged, right? But if he is the one found that he did this, when you look at the video footage and how he got away, and I'm sorry, that's not signs of mental illness. Now, there are other cases out there where clearly mental illness is something that can be looked at and talked about, but that one right there, like that guy that is a pre-planned,
premeditated.
Yeah, and he executed it with precision, But another thing that I was looking at is when it comes to the fascination, right? You said you love crime TV. What is it, if you don't mind me asking, what is it about the person that commits the crime who just so happens to have good looks?
It's interesting you bring that up because honestly, we talked about before this, and Jared was the one that kind of named off some of the killers. I mean, Ted Bundy's been known for that.
I mean, Luigi Mangione has fans outside of his trial right now. Crazy. And like, listen, do I think that big insurance companies are something that is like sacred and should be protected, and that they're these great people and I can't believe it? Like, no, I can see it and I can see how it happened, but like, we can't be glorifying like just murdering a man in the streets too.
Absolutely
like, I get the statement.
Correct.
Other ways to make it, you know what I mean? And so these people that are just like in there cheering for this guy is just like, oh, imagine seeing your daughter in there like, oh my God, Luigi. It's just like, oh, jeez.
There is a fascination for, once again, crime that just blows my mind. And that's why this shift is happening, because it's like really trying to find the starting point of it. And, you know, one person that I think of, you know, outside of like Charles Manson, he didn't really have the looks.
He had a harem.
You know, but it's like, you know, I think he had like the way with the words.
He had charisma.
He had a mouthpiece.
Yeah, the mouthpiece.
And fans, like you said, that they just, even now, he still has fans. But the case that really, you know, got my attention and happened here in Arizona was the Jodi Arias trial.
I remember that, dude. That was a big deal out here.
Now, I didn't live here at that time because I moved here in 2009, and so I knew about that upon coming here.
Oh, you were moved here a year after it happened.
Yeah, it was around that time. So it,
and she got sentenced in 2015 too. So it wasn't that long. Yeah.
Yep.
Think about that, dude. That's a long time. Yeah.
So what led you to Jodi? How did you end up here?
In my opinion, I think the mental health is one.
Okay.
Someone who is, you know, obviously good looking. They come in, they're hypersexual. You know, to me, I recognize that's a sign of bipolar. And you know, somebody that has the looks, you know, you mix the sex in it, and then, you know, the heinous crime, and then the topping is the religion. So those are like the four aspects that really make, you know, a crime, at least the four pillars that make a crime, one, stand out, but also get that media attention, right? Like the Menendez brothers.
And to Jared's point, the Lori Vallow was a baddie, dog. I mean, she don't look like that now in the court systems, but back in the day, she was an attractive woman.
I mean, look at it.
Yeah.
Religion, right? You look at Manson, you know, he was, you know, some sort of cult, but those are also called religions, right? Jim Jones, you know, with drinking the juice. You also have the UFO cult / religion with Bonnie Nettles and the Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate, that's when they all...
Yep.
It was a group of them that died,
Don't
right?
drink the Kool-Aid? Is that,
Don't drink...
that's
Well,
drink,
that's Jim Jones.
That was Jim Jones.
That's Jim
Okay.
Jones.
This alien cult was different, though.
Yes.
Why is that? It is. It's so grim, but we have this fascination. I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I think it's the same. I think it taps into a different part of, and probably an even more raw one, because it's like people. Why do people like jumping out of airplanes for something? Or why do people like roller coasters? It's like or why do people like action movies? You can get that thrill without engaging in it.
Yeah.
And there is that darkness, like the propensity to kill. It exists. Like, we're human beings and we have the ability to defend ourselves. So the ability to like take a life, but knowing that it's extreme, I think people enjoy that little dance with it. But then you tie in like potentially like your brain's telling you you're like attracted to this person. Mm-hmm. A little religion in there. It's a powder keg.
Think about how people, once the crime is committed and they're sentenced, think about all the fans and the letters and stuff that
guys get married in prison.
When you look at that case specifically, that was 10 years ago, like I said, when the conviction, but the murder happened in 2008. But that's right around the time where like court TV and the viewership,
First 48,
people wanting to see this really, really took off. You know, once again, I was trying to find, well, which case would it have been to where producers and television studios were like, hey, this could be something for the future. Mm-hmm. And the Jodi Arias case is the one that sticks out the most, you know what I mean? And being that, you know, the Jodi Arias trial happened here, at the time I didn't realize it, but I knew and still know some very important figures that were involved in that case, like Sheriff Joe.
Wow.
He was the one that took over and, you know, brought her into the Maricopa County jails, and I went out to his office to sit down and just talk with him and, see what files that he has and information that he still has on that case. One, he's old, but, got to remember that was 2008, 2015.
It was a while now.
That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Is he in his 80s now?
He's actually, Sheriff Joe is like 92, 93.
Whoa.
He's up there. Yeah.
I didn't realize he was that
Oh, wow.
attacked.
And, surprisingly, like I said, I personally know him. So being able to go and sit down and talk with him, he looks very good for his age.
Fountain Hills will do that to you.
Fountain Hills will definitely do that to you.
You're probably living all right in the mountains.
Yeah, but now that he's not in law enforcement anymore and having to deal with these high-profile cases and celebrities and
probably good for the blood pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But talking about this case with him in specific, I quickly learned why he took over the case, and he did answer some of the questions indirectly or sometimes even off camera. But one of the questions, that I had was, did you take over this case to specifically let her hang herself in those interviews? Because that information can be used against you at a later time. And with that aspect and thinking of her mental illness, going against the advice of your lawyers to sit there and just talk on camera freely, clearly that was a sign that she was mentally unstable.
0 out of 10 lawyers recommend that.
Yeah.
Particularly when it pertains to a murder trial.
I was sheriff for 24 years. Actually the longest in the history of Maricopa County. So I saw a lot of things in 24 years. And as the elected sheriff, I was head of the DEA, drug enforcement all over the world. It was a different type of operation than being the elected sheriff. Now, I really didn't do this for politics, but in a way, every politician, if they're smart, will go a little further than like a chief of police and all that. It's really a bureaucrat. So that's not why I took a special interest in Arias, because I've taken over other cases that are very controversial, very, even more so than Arias. And when I say taken over, I don't go around knocking the doors in or interviewing someone, but I take control, management control. So this is one of the cases that I had an interest in. Not because it was high profile, although that's one of the reasons, but it was a challenge. And she was in my jail. She had to eat the food and do everything that everybody else did. Now, she thought she was a prima donna, that she should be treated differently. Well, I'm an equal opportunity incarcerator. I treat everybody the same way. Now, there's a lot of media attention to this. Now, remember, I didn't lock her up. I wasn't the arresting agency. My job was to make sure she's safe and secure in the jails I run. And since I run the jails, I make the decision what they eat. It's talk that I feed them garbage. And, it's true, I feed the dogs that I had in jail better than her. But she was sort of knew how to manipulate, even from the jail. Manipulate.
Explain that. What do you mean by manipulate?
Well, she knows how to deal with the media. And being a nice guy, I would let the media come in and interview her. I didn't have to let the media come to the cell block and interview her, but I allowed that. I had nothing to hide. I let them interview any inmate. So she had that option, although I did cut her off eventually.
And then another key figure that I know, his name is Darren Birch, and he was the sergeant of Crime Stoppers, silent witness over Maricopa County. And he surprisingly he had some real ill feelings towards Jodi Arias and even the case, because he has to use the media to get his information out there. you know, and that case just took over everything, the radio, the news, newspapers, and he was not able to get his job done the entire time.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of stuff was happening on his end that, you know, he just wasn't able to push out there.
I'm retired Sergeant Darren Birch with the Phoenix Police Department. Spent 30 years with the Phoenix Police Department and worked everything from patrol to detective, got promoted to a sergeant, then became a detective sergeant. In 2008, I became the Crime Stopper Sergeant for Maricopa County, which includes Mesa, Phoenix, Scottsdale, and so forth. And Jodi Arias, that crime occurred in June of 2008. I very quickly learned that when a big crime like that occurs, it takes up the news cycle. And as a Crime Stopper Sergeant, wanting to affect the tips, you need to get on the news. There's other media you can get into, but news is best. It's visual. It affects people. And I learned very quickly from the media experts that there's 4 pillars that will get anything on the news, and that's sex, murder, any type of religion, and any kind of jealousy, where you have that passion, ugly passion, but it's still passion. And Jodi Arias' case had all 4. It really did. So it wasn't a shock to me when I realized all my media contacts were trying desperately to be able to show the Jodi Arias trial live. And that was huge. The courts didn't want it. The actual presiding judge of that trial did not want a camera in their courtroom. But the media was able to push it all the way to the higher courts, and the higher courts allowed it. It's going to the news cycle, and again, not just for a month, which is a long jury trial. She testified for a month. There was so much testimony going on, so much evidence that trial lasted a long time. And so as the Crime Stopper Sergeant, when I'm wanting to put out information about crimes I need help with, I couldn't do it because it took over. It was a circus. It was almost like sharks feeding this frenzy. The courts, the attorneys were always on the news. It just took up all the oxygen in the room. So I couldn't even present my cases during that time frame. So I absolutely despised Jodi Arias. That's why when the defense attorney said, I'm not practicing law anymore, and he literally gave up his law license and wrote the book, Surviving Jodi Arias, I understood what he meant, because she affected so many people in the judicial system. Crime Stoppers, cops, it took all the oxygen in the room when you talk about the media as being a source of good to help solicit tips in the community. I didn't have that availability.
I think right off the bat, too, one of the things that stands out to me, and I'm sure someone will hear this and be in the comments, so I won't speak definitely here, but in general, one of the few cases that the case is named after the killer. You know what I mean? It's. I remember a big one for me growing up. So honestly, Jodi Arias was probably the second biggest one that was like something on my radar. Lacey Peterson, because I was in California at the time. Yeah. You know, you think about things like that, and it's the victim. This was this sweet thing, and it's not like the guy. I mean, yeah, he wasn't an Abercrombie model, but he was a good looking, you know, like just normal looking dude. Like he would easily have been like, oh my God, that guy got killed. You would have felt bad for him, but it went with Jodi, and I think it goes a little bit back to media and what's going to sell. You don't get that many attractive lady killers. You don't get that. And they ran with it, sounds like.
It became a circus. When you have somebody like Jodi Arias, who is now testifying on her own behalf, and she spends an unprecedented 18 days on the witness stand. 18 days. And keep in mind, in trial, you really just have trials from Monday to Thursday. Friday is a admin day. So you have 4 days a week of trial. So that makes it, she was there for over a month talking about how it was everyone else's fault. She was throwing down everybody, her parents, her friends. It was everyone else's fault, and especially the victim. It was the ultimate victim bashing that she began. Talk about him being a pedophile, how he hurt her, how he was all these horrible things. It backfired on her. It didn't work. But what it did do It made her an instant celebrity because everyone, you could go anywhere in the nation at that time, and maybe even today, and ask, who is Jodi Arias? And they'll know. 9 out of 10 people will know who Jodi Arias is. But if you ask people who Travis Alexander is, they won't know. And sadly, Travis was born and raised in Riverside and was buried there because of her, and they won't even know his name.
You can look back and see that there were definitely triggers, and one of the things that was definitely overlooked in this case was the camera, the aspect of the camera.
As she was doing the act,
yes.
You mean? Yes.
The one that sticks in my head is that there's a picture of him that she took when he was in the shower.
Right before it happened.
Right before it happened.
Yep. Oh, that was the one right before.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Literally right before she.
Oh, was she armed at that one? Wait, did I miss that?
Dude,
she shot him in the head.
I thought she was toying with
stabbed
him.
No, she took the pictures before she.
Yes. So there's that picture where he's standing, and then after that, there's a picture where he's laying in a puddle of blood.
That I remember. Okay, I forgot it was right before that, but it was just like, even if he didn't know it was coming, like, just dead inside. Like, he was just, you can see it in his eyes. He was broken dealing with that.
She was a photographer. There was a camera involved during the murder.
Yeah.
There was cameras involved afterwards.
That's an interesting element. Yeah, the camera's definitely a key factor.
The underline of this case is the camera. Number one, what was said that caused you to snap? When you look at the crime itself, clearly she's in a manic episode. She's operating off of impulses. The voices are telling her what to do. Look at the crime. Look at how horrific it is, but also that's not planned. Those aren't planned actions. She's acting off of impulses. It almost feels like she went undiagnosed because even during the trial, I think there was a psychotherapist and a couple psychologists, and they all gave different diagnoses.
But of some behavioral health issue. Some of the ones that were for the prosecution talked a lot about the PTSD aspect. The ones for the defense talked about an actual issue with her in regards to ability to know right or wrong. So there's all these different type of diagnoses that occurred during even the pre-trial phase in terms of the psychiatrists and folks with a lot of initials after their names. But it was clear that she had some type of issue. Again, just the idea that she would go against her attorney's advice and keep talking, keep hanging herself, and to her own detriment, she kept doing this. Just screams there's something wrong with this young lady. Not to the point that she doesn't understand right or wrong, not to the point where she doesn't understand what she did was a crime, but to the point where she has something going on upstairs that isn't right.
She went over there the night before, stayed the night.
Yeah.
And weren't they broken up at the time?
No, I don't think
they had
so.
gone back to.
Well, the relationship was
back and forth. It was
okay.
Plus,
she lived in another state, so she didn't live here. If I'm not mistaken, she lived in either Utah or California.
Okay.
It was in California.
Okay.
Oh, Drew, that's right.
So she was driving back and forth. That's why she had the gas can, because if I think she took
that route.
Yeah, she was taking a route. So she was like the actual trip that she took, and there's gas receipts, but I don't think she knew that the rental car, they were able to keep track of the miles and locations.
That's what, yes.
Amateur mistake.
When she turned the rental car in, she went to like Vegas, California, all these different places before. She had put in like 2,800 miles on the car before she turned it in. So what we were looking at, especially talking with Darren, was obviously, she planned on killing him. But did she plan on killing him that day in specific? Because when a woman disconnects, she's not going to come to your house the night before, sleep with you, and then kill you the next day. If she snapped, truly snapped,
it would be in the moment.
It would be in the moment. Communication between Jodi and Travis became fraught with tension. What may have seemed like typical relationship struggles turned into a battleground of emotions. Jodi's manic energy pushed her to extremes, perceiving any rejection as a personal attack. In the days before the fatal encounter, Jodi's mental state deteriorated. The lines between love and rage blurred, culminating in a moment filled with desperation and chaos. Thoughts raced through her mind, leading to her act without regard for potential consequences. In the moments leading up to the tragic event, her emotions likely oscillated between love and rage, culminating in a desperate act born of turmoil. The frenzied energy of her manic episode may have propelled her towards an irreversible decision. So she had a knife, she had the gun, she was there the night before, so she might have been planning this. But when you look at the actual killing itself, keep in mind, he's in the shower. She takes a picture of him.
Defenseless.
Listen, I'm just going to say right now.
Completely defenseless.
Come to this house, 99% of the time it's going to end badly for you. If you're going to catch me lacking, post-coitus in the shower, I'm cooked. I'm toast, dude. The straps across the room. I'm not in that mindset. I mean, just truly.
You're drained.
Yeah, that's it. You're done. Your defense
if it was planned,
defense grid's down, dude.
She drained him, and you know that's why she went there to literally drain him of his energy.
Jeez.
I didn't even think of that.
Basically, he was one of those guys where he was like, came off as a player. He's like, I'm Mormon. Yeah, he's like, I'm Mormon, you know, I'm trying to save myself till marriage. Basically, he kind of finessed that situation. She started basically becoming like in love with him, but he would always keep her at a distance. She transferred to being a Mormon. She moved out there towards him.
Wait, she converted?
I forgot
She
about
converted
that
to
part.
Mormon, yeah.
Yes.
He actually baptized her. There's pictures.
Yeah, he
of
baptized
him
her personally. Yeah.
I
Okay,
completely
listen.
forgot that.
I get why she snapped.
Yeah.
He broke it off and was like, basically, this isn't working out. She had already moved there, so he started seeing somebody else. She would like stalk him. Basically, she sent the girlfriend at the time like a crazy email, basically like, you're gonna have to go through with the choices of the things that you're going through.
The murder itself and how it happened. You know, you stab somebody 27
times.
And shoot them.
Well, she sliced his throat at some point. There's stabs, and then there's slicing.
Yeah, she stabbed him, shot him in the head, and then sliced him ear to ear.
Yep. Oh. Yep.
When you slice if you're a woman, you slice a grown man ear to ear, that's vengeance. That's not...
okay.
That's not accidental. So part of me feels like this was premeditated, but there's one specific type of mental state that happens, I feel like, in a lot of murders. I personally feel like in the OJ case this happened. There's a thing called dissociative amnesia, meaning when a traumatic event happens, there's a unknown period of time where you know your body basically shuts that part off of part of your brain and forgets it. So everything that she probably did was very premeditated, driving around and all those things that seemed like a premeditated murder. But her story of every time that she kept getting interviewed, her story would change, is because those memories would be very blurry and she couldn't figure out a perfect way to lie, but she also couldn't find a perfect way to tell the truth because she didn't remember any of those things.
Kind of evokes the whole O.J. Simpson scenario where it was a heinous crime, and it was and anytime you have something like that where you have, I hate to use the word overkill, but you have like that many stab wounds. Some of them were life-threatening in and of themselves, and then the overkill of a gunshot to the forehead, which is probably post-mortem, that screams somebody within your inner circle, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, jilted lover. It just screams of that. So Jodi was really the first suspect that police would even look at. And then you add the 911 call. The 911 call when he didn't show up for a teleconference meeting, and then his friends got worried. They went to his home. They were able to get a key to get into his bedroom, and they found him. When they called 911, one of the excited utterances was, "Oh my God, Jodi." They even threw her down then. So it was clear she was the suspect. Even though she said she wasn't in Mesa, it was proven instantly she was. It was a bad lie. Could be disproved instantly. So it was 2 years later before she finally even admitted she murdered him. But even then, she had to say, in her mind, not taking responsibility, not owning it, saying that it was self-defense.
She was charged with murder. And she was in there all the time. Then she eventually went to the prison because we only hold people in our jail system. They can do their time there, like the tents. They're all convicted. I don't put non-convicted people in the tents. That's why she was never in the tents, because she wasn't convicted, number one, and number two, once you're convicted on a felony, you leave the jail and go to the state prison. But while she was in the jail for long periods of time, until you go to court, get sentenced, and all that, they stay with me. So I do know a lot of the inmates kind of want to plead guilty to get out of the jail. They hate the jail so much that they rather go to prison because you eat pretty good in the state prison. This is the jails. So she had access in a way to our commissary. Now, the inmates have a chance to buy a chocolate bar at the commissary that we have if they don't like the food. So I'm sure she took advantage of that. And I almost believe she became like a jailhouse hero because all the inmates have ways to see what's going on. Not through TV. I think she got mad because the only TV I showed was the Weather Channel and the Food Channel. I don't give them access, so she couldn't be seeing herself. Probably made her very angry on the interviews. So she's interviewed by TV, hoping to see it, but she has a problem because I don't show the regular TV in the jail. So, but I would have to call her a good inmate in that sense, not because of the crime, but she knew how far. She liked to exercise. She's exercising all. And she probably had a reputation of being the queen of the cell area. And so I put up with her, but then I cut her off. No more interviews. Something happened. It was going too far with her. So I cut her off. That made big news.
In your opinion, obviously we know she did the crime, but in your opinion, what do you think went wrong that night between her and Travis?
Well, it wasn't my case. I didn't investigate that case. So I can't talk too much about the details. The big part is how I treated her in my jails that I run. But I have ideas. I know what happened. Media made a big story over this. We have other vicious people too. But for some reason, she struck a chord. Maybe being a woman, she was good looking, and they got involved in this situation. The altercation, whatever you want to call it. So even that part was kind of extraordinary for the media to pursue, just the murder itself and so on, not what happened in the jail. But she was able to try to manipulate the jail system.
Keep in mind that as a Crime Stopper sergeant, doesn't matter where in the country or the world for that matter, your job is to get a message to the public and use these different platforms like the news agencies, TV, radio, and so forth. So you learn very quickly what the media wants. The problem is that when you have something like Jodi Arias, where you have this horrific crime, that in itself is a media darling. You got a victim that was stabbed, sliced over 27 times. He had his carotid ripped. He had his trachea ripped. He was shot in the head after all this, post-mortem. So it was a heinous crime. So that in and of itself rises to a level of media attention. It really does. But when you add arguably an attractive figure like Jodi Arias, whether you think she's attractive or not, there's people out there that do. And you have sex between her and the victim, and it's wild sex. And then you have religion. He baptized her like a month after they met, before they got intimate. And then when they got intimate, they got crazy with the cameras. One of the big items of evidence was the camera that he was taking pictures, or she was taking pictures, we don't know, of their sexual encounter literally hours before she killed him. In fact, one of the pictures was of him bleeding profusely to what we really couldn't see his face on the shower floor.
What is your theory on why she did what she did in that moment?
Yeah, the prosecution tried to lay out the framework that this was planned, premeditated, thought out to the nth degree. And that could be true. The problem I have with that is their sexual relation prior to the crime. To me, that screamed not a planned event for that moment. Doesn't mean she wasn't thinking about maybe killing him, maybe so angry, because they had a very rocky relationship by all accounts. Whether you talk to her friends or you talk to his friends, they had a rocky relationship. They were on the outs, it was long distance, he had other girlfriends on the side, and there was always this tumultuous relationship. And what really hit me with her is sometimes people say things and it's a Freudian slip. And her defense, she said that he was angry because she broke his camera, that she dropped it in the shower and it broke. So maybe the camera was an element of that snap, but maybe, or most definitely not per her story. It wasn't because he became angry, but maybe he was doing some filming and she felt dissed. And now you're breaking up with me, and there's this camera with these evidence of my sexual escapades. So it was like insult on injury. And that could have made her snap, went to the kitchen, was angry, and then sees a knife. And then that moment, she goes into killer mode.
It's just interesting how Jodi Arias' name like really took over the case. She took over. I mean, when you really look at it, she was really the mastermind. Like, this girl was not stupid at all. You know what I mean? Like, she was able to commit a crime. And one thing that I noticed, like, the looks didn't really appear, like, she didn't come off as a girl that knew she was beautiful prior to the murder.
Kind of naive.
Right? Because you know how some of the girls are when they know they look good.
If you pull up to Old Town Scottsdale, you'll see the ones that know what they look like.
She meets a nice
Jodi,
LDS guy.
Let's be real. Jodi in Scottsdale and living in that type of Tempe.
Yep.
You put it together, you're like, she didn't really know about the looks.
Yeah, she would have been kind of an average
afterward.
Joe.
Right?
Maybe so, yeah.
But it wasn't until she got arrested, the photos, your mug shots are so sensationalized nowadays. People are like, I want to bail this girl out, or the guy that with the green eyes, the tattoos,
Yes, I remember that guy. Yes,
he got a modeling deal after that, right? Yep. So it's like, if you look at it, we really look. Yes, we can look at OJ, and that was one of the ones where it was, we actually had the news, but where that shift, where the news was starting to close out in podcasts and social media and all that stuff, the Jodi Arias case sticks out.
Yeah,
by far.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you mentioned so do you feel like the cameras were a bit of a trigger? Do you think, and we said maybe bipolar, multiple personality disorder, whatever that was, do you think there's an element of like narcissism or psychopathy there? And then she was someone who late in life maybe discovers that, I have looks here. Like, she starts hearing things like, you're going through this thing, but people are saying you're good looking or something when the mugshot comes out, and that she starts hearing coverage of it. Do you think that's like what maybe Joe recognized is like, there's an element of that here, and if I, that's gasoline, and basically, and once there's some spark.
So the common factor between Joe and Jodi is the cameras. They love cameras. Sheriff Joe, he loves cameras, right?
Okay, yeah.
So it was an opportunity, and I hate to use the word opportunity, but it was an opportunity for him to take a high profile case, but also it doesn't take long, especially as guys, to know when somebody's mental state is off, especially a female.
This is true. Dude.
So it's sitting there, probably the guards and everybody, and even the inmates. She's a little off her rocker.
They gave each other the nod.
Yep. And then, she wants interviews, cameras, all of that stuff has to be approved by Sheriff Joe. Sitting down and talking to him, I was like, oh, wow, a lot of those interviews that took place happened in your jail. If she's unstable, it's going to turn into a high-profile case. The murder happened in 2008. She wasn't convicted until 2015. Yeah. That's 7 years later, right? And then on top of that, that's 7 years of publicity, you know, on top of the other high-profile cases.
And that's when, was it SB 49? What was that? What was going on at that time? What was that law that Sheriff Joe implemented?
Was that all the?
It was SB something. It was like SB.
Pink intensive.
No. It was when he was pulling people over. Oh. You remember that? It was like SB 49 or SB. That,
I don't remember the exact
law. There's some law, but that was around
like the
that
New York
time.
Frisk and stop
yes,
thing.
correct. Yeah, it was the Arizona version of that. And so to your point, it just clicked in my head that. Yeah, that was Sheriff Joe's time. He was always on the news, and you were always seeing him constantly.
And you got to look at it like the sheriff is really a political position, right? You're elected.
It's not like the Westerns anymore. He's not out there. Yeah. He's
not
the best gunslinger in town. Yeah,
exactly. And not only that, he was sheriff for like 24, 25 years.
Long time.
That's almost 3 decades.
I dealt with her and really had no problem. She was sort of a good inmate in that sense. Caused some problems.
I think the weight of the evidence finally sunk in. I really do. I think it was beyond the pale that she could think that she could get away with this crime with all the evidence against her. So in her mind, she thought, you know what? I'm a victim. Regardless of the viciousness of the attack, regardless of the premeditated aspect of the gas can, the car, the fake burglary reports so she could get a gun, all that leads to premeditated. It really does. But I think when she looked at the evidence at some point, I don't know how smart she is. I know she didn't finish high school, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's, illiterate. She's gifted, clearly. She can sing, she can draw, she can paint. Very artistic young lady. But I don't know how her cognitive functioning could have looked at that case and thought, I need to shut the hell up and let my defense attorney represent me. Instead, she just had this overwhelming need for attention. She just did. And it's possible, and again, you'd have to ask a psychiatrist, but sometimes if you tell a lie long enough, you start to believe it. So did she try to convince herself, or did she convince herself?
By allowing her to, really stick a camera in her face and just let her go, I think people knew. I'm pretty confident that they knew, and they just let it go. If we take the cameras out of her life, we take the cameras out of the jail cells. Keep in mind, she also sang that song. I don't know if you heard that, the "Oh Holy Night" song, and that it is very disturbing. Oof. It almost sounds like a confession, and she, maybe like 4 months prior, she actually changed her story like a third or fourth time, and said, what she did, self-defense and all that stuff. But the timing, the song itself, very creepy.
See, I had a program. Remember Inmate Idol, or I think...
American Idol.
I think Fox did that. Which, by the way, Fox doesn't talk to me anymore. I'm not going to mention some guy that I investigated, but his picture is right up there. So, I said, I'm going to do Inmate Idol. It's good for the inmates. They have something to do. They can start singing and try to win. I forgot what the reward was. Maybe it was steak instead of bologna. I don't know. There was some reward. So then Cooper, he's a nice guy, Alice Cooper. I said, hey, I need a judge. Will you help me? Oh, yeah, sure. So I use him as a judge on Inmate Idol. Me and him. We decide which inmate is going to not win. The fix isn't in. But she just happened to win. So we went through the whole system. Preliminary, also eliminate some of the people that can't even talk in the jail, forget singing. So we had a final deal. And she gets up there, She did a pretty good job.
In December of 2010, in the Maricopa County Jail, ran by former Sheriff Joe Arpaio, a contest took place in the form of American Idol called Inmate Idol. Jodi beat out 50 other inmates to win this competition. And with permission from Joe Arpaio, here's a video of the song that she sang.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices, oh night divine, oh night when Christ was born, oh night divine, oh night divine.
Now, she probably had a lot of time to sing. I'm not going to call her an informer. Informers sing, they confess and all that. So she knew how to do it. And she made something out of herself in a bad way. When you start chopping somebody's head off or whatever, that's not nice. But she took advantage of that. So I played along with her. She was high profile. A lot of media wanted to talk to her. That's okay. No, I let the media talk to a lot of people. Now this one, as I say, had a way to get the story out. But I think I cut her off as time went on. It was getting too complicated, how she would use the interviewer. And don't forget, she was through a court system, facing the death penalty and all that. But I did allow people to talk to her.
The most important thing in a jury trial is getting the jury to understand the crime scene as it relates to the evidence, but also to the investigators. For example, when that 911 call came out and patrol is responding, this is a patrol response, and they get there, they're looking at this horrendous, bloody scene that is not just in the shower, but now they have a bloody palm print on the wall, and now they're going to follow any kind of blood trail because he was fighting for his life. And 27 stab wounds, 27 areas for there to be bleeding and profusive bleeding. This is one of those horrific scenes that's right out of the movies. You're looking at all the intricate things to include cameras. You're looking at, and then you find a camera in a washing machine. Well, that goes right to forensics. So this is a crime scene that gave up so much evidence. Jodi, again, is suspect number one. And that's based on a crime scene that just screamed her name.
And I could be wrong on this, but I think that she went into delete mode. Is not only was the crime on there, but I think she found something on that camera that she wasn't expecting.
Could be. Very, very possible. As she's going through the camera, she could find another girl. Absolutely a possibility. But to our point, I think the camera is the key. I think the camera is the key because she used it as a defense mechanism. Like he was angry because I dropped it. And so the camera was on her mind. Yeah, because to the prosecution's credit, they talked a lot about the rental vehicle and the gas can. so that she could hide her travel. She had a gas can that she would fill up the vehicle, so there was no, documentation of that trip going from gas station to gas station. So it makes sense that it was planned. I just don't know if it was planned, like maybe this wasn't the only trip she took with a gas can. Maybe there was other times she visited him, because she clearly would visit him. And there's times where he would visit her. They had this long distance relationship, booty calls, if you will. And it's real possible that this was just one of many type of trips where she had it in the back of her mind. She had the gun, she would fake the travel where no one would know, she thought. So this may not have been her first foray in this belief that she might kill him.
That was another part of the trial too, right? It was like they wanted the death penalty. The jury, I guess, voted against it because in the state of Arizona, there's still the death penalty, right?
Yes.
You can still die.
Pretty conflicted on it, though. I think the panel was.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Held up.
So there was.
There was two different situations that happened. I think one was a hung jury.
Yep.
And then one of them was I don't remember the legal term, but basically it was claimed as a mistrial.
Yep. And that's where the Juan Martinez information, where he leaked. Well, he didn't leak. He was telling a blogger inside information. And he was, I don't know exactly what, but when you go to court where you're going to be disbarred.
But both attorneys used the media to their advantage. Juan Martinez, which was a prosecutor, every day practically, he would stop and talk with the media about it. He would talk about different things and trying to get the public on his side, if you will. And I tell you, when she was announced guilty, when the indictment came, there was a crowd of cheers because of how disgusting she killed him. She wanted the attention. She wanted to convince people that she was innocent to a point where it was ridiculous. And against her attorney's advice, she could not help herself and kept wanting these interviews. Not just before, but during and even after. She still kept doing these interviews. And every one was potential for her to hang herself. She couldn't help herself. She loved the spotlight. She loved what in her mind was fame without the fortune. She loved the attention. And I don't know if she truly thought she could outlie herself in this situation, because the evidence was so damning that there's not an attorney in the world, to include Kirk Nermy, that's going to say, oh yeah, talk to the press. No, you don't talk. It's rule number one. She broke rule number one over and over again. It's more telling of who she is than what the case was.
And then the other situation that Drew was talking about is one of the jurors said no to the death penalty. And that juror actually was receiving death threats after that. So wow. The Jodi Arias case, there's just so much fallout that was involved with that case. I mean, the lawyers, both of them, no longer practicing.
Wow.
Travis Alexander, and you got to keep in mind, people know here we say Jodi Arias, but who did she kill?
Exactly. Other cases, Gabby Patino, I think it was, and Brian was, I know it was Brian Laundrie, I think. So I know the killer's name, but it takes me a second. That was the Gabby Patino case.
Think of the victim's
It was the
name.
Lacey Peterson, and I think the husband's name was Scott Peterson, but it's it was never.
I just finished the John Wayne Gacy doc on Netflix, and that was one thing that Joe Berlinger, who's done a lot of those documentaries, it's a lot of times they focus on the murderer versus the people who were murdered.
You know what's interesting? When you look at, and I talked about the fact that we don't know Travis Alexander's name. We know Jodi Arias' name. But it's not that true about the attorneys. Both attorneys had a lot of attention driven on them because they were part of this soap opera, this live soap opera involving sex, murder, religion, jealousy, rage. All these things, they were part of that soap opera. And I know for a fact, Juan Martinez, the prosecutor, got sucked into it, no doubt. I mean, he got disbarred, or he gave it up because of the accusations that he was giving inside information to a blogger real-time information during the trial. That was the accusation. He said he didn't do it, but he ended up giving up his license so he wouldn't have to go to trial for that. And then you look at Kurt Nerming, he ended up getting cancer. Was that because of the stress? Because stress does a lot to you. And he had a lot of stress going on during that time frame. He had a client that wouldn't listen to him. He had a client that would not shut up. And he's doing everything legitimately in his powers as a defense attorney to protect her from herself and can't. How frustrating is that? To the point where he gave up his license. You have two attorneys. The two attorneys no longer practice law. She didn't only kill Travis and figuratively kill his reputation, I think she also killed those two attorneys, figuratively speaking.
She killed her, whatever she had. Her life is gone. Travis is gone. Those attorneys are gone. I guess
a lot of fallout. There's a lot of fallout with her. And again, I'm not saying that their actions doesn't speak to who they are, but they were put in a situation where she was really the person orchestrating everything. If you think about it, she wants to be on the stand. You can't stop her. You can give her all the great advice in the world, but you can't stop her from talking. And now she's talking. She is a calamity. She's a train wreck, and she keeps talking. And the pressures that occur during this trial, if you will, it's a trial of the century that end up hurting more than just her. It ended up hurting a lot of the people involved, to include that jury. We haven't even talked about the death threats that the jurors had. You had the initial phase, which they were all found her guilty. But during the sentencing trial to determine whether or not it was going to be a death sentence with the capital murder aspect, you had one juror who did not want to go along with the other 11 and did not want her put to death. And that juror had death threats. That juror's information was leaked to the public, and they had death threats against them. I don't want to give away the gender or anything because I don't want to add to that. But there's a lot of casualties, a lot of people that were hurt by Jodi Arias on top of the crime itself, just based on the trial.
Hey, you got to give her credit for one thing. Geez, maybe if she was an honest gal, maybe in there just for drunk driving, maybe I would have hired her as my public relation officer. so in lieu of that, I dealt with her and really had no problem.
I don't think there's any elements you could change within the trial that would have precluded or negated the ultimate indictment. Not at all. The case was solid. The evidence was solid. She did it. But there's things you could have done to limit the fallout. First and foremost is not having a live camera in a murder trial with somebody that's such a narcissist that wants that attention and that will talk and just, you don't know what you're gonna get. The center of attention, it becoming a circus, that added fuel to the fire that really burnt a lot of people involved in this case. So I think the end result of her being life in prison would never have changed, regardless of any of the elements that you could change to include the attention with the media. But by not having a live streaming camera and such a debacle of a defendant, she was her worst enemy, but she was also an enemy of all of us. Because if you witness that, and again, I never watched a single show. I never watched a single. I was hearing it, not daily, hourly, from my contacts in the media. They would tell me, oh, did you hear this? Did you hear this? You couldn't avoid it, especially in my line of work. You couldn't avoid it. But by limiting that live stream, by limiting the cameras, that is a good thing. And I just noticed maybe they've learned, because in a lot of cases, you don't have that same effect. Now again, court TV is everywhere. You know, there is that component out there, that need for that sensationalizing entertainment. giving into it as entertainment. Who are we hurting? We're hurting, the defendant, the prosecution, defense, but I think we're hurting ourselves too.
When she sang "Oh Holy Night," it's a complete difference. That's the scared little girl that's realizing what she's done. And that song almost feels like a confession. But it's very unfortunate and it's sad. Travis is no longer here. She's in prison the rest of her life. Knowing the signs that she was not mentally there, reacting off of impulses, the manipulation in the court, everywhere with the media, all the signs were there. And she went undiagnosed, probably her entire life, probably still, till this day.
Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices, oh night divine, oh night when Christ was born, oh night divine, oh night divine.
I wasn't doing it hard at first. It wasn't good enough. Oh my God.
Which, by the way, Fox doesn't talk to me anymore. I'm not going to mention some guy that I investigated, but his picture is right up there.
You know, her mental health was overlooked, glazed over.
Yeah.
And then not only that, there was just a lot of, fallout, even with the lawyers. Both of them aren't practicing law anymore.
Really? I did not know that. Wow. Especially on her team, I could see that. I mean, that was...
His name is
You should have just gotten out of there.
Yeah, and he was leaking inside information.
Whoa.
To like a blogger or something like that. You got to keep in mind, when I say blogger, that was the term.
Well, that back then,
blogger,
yes.
Right?
Huge.
Blogger,
Yeah.
Think about it, it wasn't that long ago.
The new generation might not know what that is, but we do.
TV, radio was still like the most popular. Podcasts were literally just becoming a thing. Like literally just becoming a thing. That's where we saw everything on TV. That's kind of where we saw it. And then there's very few limited resources of like sourcing to get informations of stories like this, unless it was like the Times, any type of, newspaper publication. So this is, I think people were more excited about this because it was at the right age group where people were really interested. It was different for like the OJ case where he's a celebrity figure. He's a little bit older, so more people that grew up with him. That's why it was so like a nationwide thing. Where this was like, this is somebody that could be your next door neighbor that could happen to this.
I was looking at the aspect of She was a photographer. There was a camera involved during the murder.
Yeah.
There was cameras involved afterwards.
That's an interesting element. Yeah, the camera is definitely a key factor.
The underline of this case is the camera.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked that. You remove the cameras, I think we get a different Jodi. These lawyers might still be in place. Even down to where we are at with crime TV. You talked about court television and all this stuff. The need and thirst, especially in women with crime and murder.
It's fascinating to look or focus, no pun intended, on the camera as a continuous element of this crime. Again, we talked a lot about the camera that was in a washing, right? That was direct evidence, linking evidence to her crime. But she was a photographer. And then you add the cameras in the courtroom. And this camera just keeps, it's almost like this iconic image that if you were to paint a picture of this, you just have to paint a camera. And it had elements within all this.
There was sort of a breach of trust in our relationship.